Today, we're going to dive into a really radical new way of looking at the universe, and it's all based on the work of Phan. The basic idea? Reality isn't really about things, it's about a single fundamental rule that governs everything.
Okay, so let's start with what we all learn in school, right? Physics is about a handful of fundamental forces. Gravity, electromagnetism, these big cosmic players that push and pull on everything. And of course, these forces are acting on fundamental particles. You've got your electrons, your quarks, all the tiny little building blocks that make up, well, you, me, and everything else. It's a story about actors and the actions they take. But hang on, that leaves a much deeper question on the table. If you think about the entire universe as one single, massive system, what's the actual rule, the literal source code that updates the whole thing from one moment to the next? What's the master algorithm running in the background? To even try and answer a question that big, this framework says we have to completely shift our perspective. We need to stop just looking at what happens and start asking about the underlying rule that makes anything happen at all. Here's a good way to think about it. The traditional way of doing physics is kind of like watching a movie and just describing each scene as it comes. This deeper view, though, is like trying to reverse engineer the game engine that's actually rendering the movie in real time. And this leads us right to the core idea of this whole thing. The most foundational law in the universe isn't a force, and it's not a particle. It's a rule. It's a single instruction for how everything evolves. So this rule gets a name, the evolution operator, which we'll just call U. You can basically think of it as the universe's ultimate update button. It takes the entire state of reality at one moment as its input, and it just computes the very next moment. Now, this equation might look simple, but it is incredibly profound. All it's really saying is the way the universe is going to be in the next instant is a direct function of how it is right now. And the theory proposes that everything we know, Newton's laws, quantum mechanics, all of it, are just localized, specific examples of this one single fundamental update rule doing its thing. Okay, so if the universe is really just this huge system that's evolving according to one rule, then what does it even mean for something to exist? Like, what makes an atom or a planet or us real? Well, the answer comes from this really beautiful idea in math called an eigenstate. An eigenstate is basically a stable solution. A perfect analogy is a guitar string. When you pluck it just right, it produces a clear, stable note that just rings. It doesn't dissolve into noise. It's in perfect harmony with the laws of physics. That note is an eigenstate. And that's the crucial point right there. In this view, things don't exist as solid, independent objects. They exist because they are stable patterns, configurations that hold their shape when the universe's update rule is applied to them. To exist is to be stable. What's so amazing is that this one idea connects things across totally different scales. An electron's weird quantum state, a planet's predictable orbit, even the majestic spiral arms of a galaxy. They all exist for the exact same fundamental reason. They are all stable solutions, eigenstates, of the universe's one update rule. But hold on a second. If to exist is to be stable, then why isn't the universe just frozen? Why isn't it a static, perfect crystal? Why do things change and evolve and decay all the time? This framework has a name for that, too, deviation. It's pretty much just a measure of how out of tune any given state is with the master rule. So a perfect eigenstate is like a top spinning flawlessly forever. Deviation is any wobble in that spin. And that wobble, that's what drives all change. So think about this. Change, evolution, even that unstoppable force we call entropy, they aren't fundamental forces themselves. They're just the result of these wobbly, unstable states trying to settle down, trying to find a more stable, a more in-tune configuration. It's like the universe is constantly trying to resolve its own internal dissonance. Now, this idea of states settling into stability gives us a completely new language to talk about one of the most mysterious things we know of: intelligence. I want you to imagine a giant 3D landscape with hills and valleys. The specific shape of this landscape is determined by that evolution operator, U. Now, any state of the universe is like a marble you place somewhere on this landscape. What's it going to do? It's going to roll downhill and settle at the bottom of the nearest valley. Those valleys, those are the stable solutions. They're called attractors. So this theory suggests there are two kinds of intelligence. First, there's emergent intelligence. This is the ability to find a valley in the landscape that already exists. A great example is biological evolution, finding a stable niche for a new species. But then there's operator intelligence, which is way more profound. That's the ability to actually reach in and reshape the landscape itself, to carve out brand new valleys. And that's what we do with something like genetic engineering, where we're literally changing the rules of the game.
This brings us to the final, and honestly, the most mind-bending implication of this entire way of thinking. If every persistent thing we see, from a star to a galaxy to life itself, is just a stable solution to this grand cosmic update rule, and if we are part of that very same system, subject to that very same rule, then what does that make us? Well, according to this work, our consciousness isn't some ghost floating in the machine separate from the laws of physics. It is an unbelievably complex, stable solution, an eigenstructure, that has become so intricate that it can actually start to understand the very operator, the very rule that created it in the first place.
So maybe the ultimate takeaway is this. Perhaps we're not just living in the universe as observers looking out at it. Perhaps we are the universe, a piece of its own structure that has finally become complex enough to wake up and begin to figure out its own rules.